Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. We're 10 days from Christmas. Are you ready? Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about, again, kind of one of our controversial issues, especially in terms of the way we talk about it as a society, and that is what's going on at the southern border. I will tell you that several of my parishioners, for several years, we've been taking youth groups and things down to the border area just to see what's going on, and so for them to kind of get some of their own impressions, especially about people who are seeking refugee status here in the United States. And all of a sudden, this past year, some of my group decided, of my adults of the parish, that they wanted to go. So the first time, I went down with a group to the southern border of the United States to do their own adult fact-finding mission. And so I've got two of the members of that group, Mary Vu and Christy Jones, who are here to talk to us about what they saw in terms of the justice issues at the southern border. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. We'll hope you stay with us for an interesting show this morning.
It was silly to be so dreading it so much because it was really no big deal. There was no pain afterwards. I was really, really hungry, so I got to have whatever I wanted to have for lunch. But you know, the rest of the day I just slept, and there was no pain, and went to work the next day. Every day that I opened up my refrigerator and saw that referral on my refrigerator, I just dreaded having to go through it. And now I just kind of laugh about it because it was no big deal. And knowing it's behind me, I just don't have to worry about it. Well, my husband and I, we do a lot of riding, and we kind of cram everything into the weekends. But eventually, we'd like to, once we retire, we want to be able to go on vacations on our bikes and go riding on weekends a lot more. So we have a lot to look forward to.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. We're very honored that you spend some of your Sunday morning with us. My guests this morning, Christy Jones and Mary Vu, both members of St. Peter the Apostle Parish, so full disclosure here. You guys, just tell Christy, I mean, you've been down there. This is your third trip down there?
Fourth trip.
Fourth trip. So tell us a little bit how this evolved for you. You can tell us a little bit about yourselves first if you want, in case, because they've not met you. So why don't you just tell them a little bit about yourselves, how long you've been here in Joplin, those kinds of things, and then we'll go with how this evolved for you.
Okay. I've been in Joplin for about 10 years. My husband and I have 4 kids, and my husband is not Catholic. I am Catholic, a member of St. Peter's, and 2 of our kids go through the Catholic school system. So that is kind of what led me to wanting to take kids down to the border.
Mm-hmm. And my name is Mary Vu, and I am a parishioner at St. Peter's. I'm also the founder and coordinator of the Eagle Reserve at Joplin High School.
There you go.
And I've lived in Missouri all my life, born in Springfield and raised in Joplin.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So Christy, you've done this now for a little while. Why do you keep going back? What is it that you're trying to figure out or learn, or what is it that you're trying to fork on, change, or whatever? And why did you suddenly now decide to go with a group of adults for a change rather than taking the youth like you typically do?
I started out helping out in the youth group several years back, and I noticed that there was a gap in mission trips. They were not offered regularly through the church, and that is something that I had during high school, so I wanted to work towards that. So the leaders of the youth group and I worked together to get our initial group going down, I guess about 4 years ago, and we had 10 students go. They're all high school age, and then the next year, it was such an amazing opportunity for them to learn. They definitely had to reach outside of their comfort zones in every possible facet of life. You know, we don't stay in very fancy surroundings, and we're not very comfortable throughout the entire mission trip, and that's not their normal life. So anyways, it was a huge success. The kids loved it, so we went the next year, and we went the next year. This year was different because when I made the call out to the students and said, who's interested, who's gonna go, only 2 people raised their hands, and one of them was my son. So I started to inquire what's happening with the group, where is everybody? And by and large, they said, my mom or my dad doesn't want me to go down because of safety issues.
That's fair. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a fair concern.
So, and then having been down there, I was never scared.
Yeah.
We never crossed over the border when we went with kids, so I was never scared. So I thought, all right, this is now an adult education thing. It's no longer a youth. We've got to educate the moms and the dads. And
Or even those that might not be moms or dads.
Right.
Yet, but
Not
yeah,
yet.
Yeah.
yeah, so that is what led us to open it up to the adults.
Yeah. Well, and again, you were one of those so when you heard Christy knew what she was getting herself into. You didn't know what you were getting yourself into at that point in time. So what was the call for you? Why did you decide you wanted to go down there, and what did you want to find out when you went?
Well, there were a couple of really big reasons for why I wanted to go down there. And the first one I share with a lot of the other adults that went on this mission trip. And it was just to see for myself what's actually happening. Because, one news outlet is going to say something about one event and another news outlet will say something different. And it's really hard to find the truth in what's happening. And so I just wanted to see for myself and bring back those impressions. The second big reason is because I wanted to help those are suffering. And it's obvious that there are people suffering at the border. My parents came here as Vietnamese refugees during the 70s. And so I just wanted to give back and honor the kind of help that they received. Right. And try to do the same for other people that are trying to come to the States.
Yeah. This was, now, Christy, you mentioned the fact that, and this was the first time, because again, when we're taking students, we don't mess with, years ago when I took students, I've been going down for like 20 some odd years, but when we used to take college students, and then we take them across the border, but we haven't done that the last couple of trips that we did. We hadn't done that because, again, safety issues and concerns, and we didn't want to put anybody in harm's way. But this time you did cross the border. Which I thought was interesting, and I'm like, well, you don't have to do that. And you're just like, no, we think we really want to. What was the big push to do that? Why did you want to cross the border this time?
We wanted to go where the people are. They are no longer here in the United States in Catholic Charities Respite Center, being served, being fed, being clothed. They are crossing the border, being detained, and then sent back over the border. So the need is essentially no longer here. Immersing yourself in the environment is, in my opinion, the key to a mission trip. And we can't do that if we're not over there with the people experiencing the same smells, the same sights. Everything that they see, everything they feel, we need to be there to understand that. And so we had to go over to the border and see their tents and see their living conditions.
Yeah. Interesting in terms of that, because, of course, my connection down there for many years was La Posada Providencia, which is run by the Sisters of Divine Providence, who helped raise me. They've had basically a location where people who are in the refugee process, right, the asylum process, were able to live while they were preparing their cases, or until they could relocate to be with family, or had a job enough that they were stable on their own, depending on how all that unfolded for them in their case. So we, for many years, did that. And there are still some, while we were down there, we also had that, or that experience at the refugee center. But the way that's all being processed is now completely different. Before, if they would come and say, I'd like to apply for asylum, they had a process to go through, but that's now been changed.
Yes.
How's that changed, and how did that all come about? And so then before you could visit with refugees a lot more readily,
right,
without necessarily crossing the border and without that big tent city on the other side. So what experience did you have that led you to that particular place, and why did you think that was important for you to see that part of the process?
Well, it's modern day. We have to stay up with what's going on right now. So last year, the year before, and the year before that, we would see 100, 200 refugees coming through the Catholic Charities, where, everybody, when they come in right off the buses, you say, "Bienvenidos, welcome to the United States." And it's just this moment of, your trip is done. you're okay, you're safe for right now. We're going to give you some food. We're going to give you some clothing. So that is what was the experience. And then from there, they would go on into the United States to be with family or host
Sponsors,
families, right?
Yeah.
So that's not the reality anymore. So again, we needed to be where the need was.
So what was the reality that you experienced?
Yeah, honestly, I'm still processing it.
Okay.
It was one of the most horrible conditions I've ever seen people living in. It was very distressing. It reminded me a lot of, and again, it's not even my own experiences, but war movies, the type of camps that people lived in, just horrid conditions. And so going over to Matamoros, Mexico, where those makeshift camps are, where these people have to stay in order to go get their appointment for their court date. They're not allowed to work. They don't have clean water. They just recently put in porta potties, so they have a place to go to the bathroom now. But they sleep straight onto concrete ground. There were children who had bruises on their backs because it was so uncomfortable to sleep on such rough grounds. And it didn't feel safe at all. I mean, Matamoros is considered in Mexico, to the Mexican government, the #1 city for kidnaps. And the people just don't feel safe about it. There were migrants who said that they slept in shifts in their tents so that they could watch over their kids in case a cartel member would try to abduct their child, which they have abducted children and then young women too.
And so you're saying that that some of the cartels or the organized crime on the other side of the border that were trying to take advantage of people there in the tent city.
Exactly, and they are, because we were only allowed to bring over food, drink, and medicine, and then some hygienic items. We weren't allowed to bring over clothing or shoes or blankets. These basic necessities for survival, for living, especially now that it's getting colder. And the cartels, it's organized, and so if you do want to bring over those items, the blankets, shoes, and clothing, you have to give them money for it. And one of the volunteers at Catholic Charities told us that they said it would be $1,000 to bring over a van of that material, and they don't want to feed into organized crime, so they refuse to. So the way they work around it is to just buy camping gear. And so they give them the emergency camping blankets, and so you see that all over the place in Matamoros. And it's not enough, especially with how cold it gets at night, which was 40 degrees one night while we were there.
So, even in terms of some of the relief organizations on this side of the border who would even take those things to the other side of the border, take care of those things, they can't do it because, again, the organized crime in the area. So it's interesting. I just keep thinking about when they were at least on this side of the border. They were still challenged and didn't have a lot of the comforts and things like that, but at least we didn't have to worry quite so much about, kids being kidnapped or people being co-opted into some kind of a trafficking situation at that point in time. Very interesting in terms of, again, you saying, some changes, and so what were the reasons for the changes? Just real quickly, because we've got to take a break here in a second.
The changes in how they process the refugees. It's essentially the
We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Just to hold that thought.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
All right, my apologies. I was getting involved in the conversation and not watching my timing and everything else. So we were talking right before the break about why the policies changed or what's going on. So again, what causes that, and how do we how do we influence it? How do we change it? Do we get it back to the old system? What do we do?
We do better than we are now, one way or another. What I'm going to tell you what it used to be, and then I'll tell you what it is now, so there's a compare and contrast. What used to be was refugees would come over. They would intentionally flag down Border Patrol. Hey, I'm here. I'm coming over illegally. They would be detained, processed, given some papers, which would allow them then to stay in the United States and have their case heard at the immigration courthouse. During their time, they could stay in the United States with a family member who could keep them safe and warm and fed. And supported, financially supported. They would have the tags on their ankles, ankle bracelets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the tabs were kept on them, and it was known where they were. The administration, the United States administration, made a deal with the Mexican government, basically saying that we as a country, the United States, will no longer do that. We are now turning them back over to the Mexican government.
So pushing them, sending them back across the border.
This is unprecedented. So typically, the United States, our policy is to return them to their country of origin. So if a person from Guatemala comes here, we don't send them back to Mexico. We have to take them to Guatemala if we're going to refuse asylum, okay? Right. No longer are we able to do that. Now we just send them right back over to Mexico, regardless of whether they're from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, it doesn't matter. They're going over to Mexico. The people in that tent community are by and large not Mexicans.
Right.
They're coming from these countries that have extreme poverty, extreme crime. Guatemala is the 9th top murder capital of the entire world. Right here, it's our southern neighbor. And so that is the change. That essentially is what has changed. And it's a very recent change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's created this tent city on the other side of the border, and had to do some of those things. So why again, because I don't know that all of our visitors have stopped to think about this, but why would people be leaving their homeland to come to the United States? Is it just that they want what we want or what we have, or why would they be coming here?
So there are many different reasons, all of them coming from a place of desperation and fear, complete desperation and fear. The organized crime is so horrible in some of the communities that, yes, parents think that it's the very best choice for their family, for themselves, for their children, to spend all of their life savings to make that trip to the U.S., to even have the opportunity to live here. And, I've had questions about, well, why don't they just move? Why don't they just go to a big city? And that's the cartels are that strong that they have a little piece of the police. They have headhunters specifically for finding people, or they make threats. They say, if you leave, we're going to kill one of your family members. And these are like actual accounts of people who've migrated. And so it's just out of sheer desperation. So if you can imagine that, say you're in Carthage and people just break into your house and take your kid, and then they want like $5,000 for your kid. You call the police and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. As far as we know, you don't have a kid. What would you do? You would be scared. You wouldn't feel safe in your community anymore. The cartel's forcing you to do things you don't want to do. So,
and not only that, it's cartels, gangs, military regimes, the political scenario in these countries, just by and large. Their world is not our world. Right. I don't think that we can possibly fathom what it is to sit in one of their homes on their street and think, I'm not going to cross the street because I might get shot. Or I'm not going to let my kid go out in 2 feet from my front yard because they're going to get taken. It's an entirely different reality. And when we can learn that and accept that and say, I don't have the ability to empathize because this country is so great, but we can help,
Yeah, it's important to know that we can do some things to help, even though we are far away. There are some things that you can do.
It's interesting to me because, again, I hear some of the responses that basically say, well, they need to learn to solve their own problems where they are. How would you respond to that when people would just say, well, they just need to solve their own problems. We can't solve all the problems of the world. How do you respond to that after talking to some of these folks that you've met?
And we certainly can't. We cannot take in all of the refugees in the world. I'm not naive. I don't think any of us going down were naive in that sense. But there is so much that we can do. There has to be a middle ground,
I mean, even if there's a maximum amount of refugees and people seeking asylum of the number that we can take in the United States, there has to be a better way to not give them these inhumane conditions in which they're living in. That's completely preventable. Because
so your challenge right now is to say this business about sending them back across the border is one of the things that you would like to see our government change at this point in time, or that policy change.
It's a humanitarian crisis. It absolutely is, because these are thousands. Matamoros is one city, and there's cities all across the border that are identical to this. It's estimated there's 500,000 displaced people right now along the border, and that's crazy when we have what we have in our country.
Yeah, and we're still helping them. I mean, Catholic Charities in Brownsville, right? They still have to cross the border, walking across with their wheelbarrows every single day, twice a day, so that the people there will get fed. And when we went, we brought over 200 sandwiches and like 12 gallons of milk, and they were gone in minutes, and it's still not enough. They have no access to food or water. Like, the charities that come over there, literally walk over there, are their only chances of survival right now. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah. And again, it's just, this is one of those things that we argue about and fight about here in our own community. It's just like, well, what are we going to do? Well, this is the right policy. This is the wrong policy. We need to be doing something different. Or, well, we can't take these people. What are we going to do? So in terms of those things, I guess one thing would we just say, if anybody wants to, I know this group is preparing some things for St. Peter's to just talk about what their experience was and what sort of things. I mean, I don't think we're going to suddenly become policy wonks and figure out how to solve some of that. But if anyone is interested, we just want to, I know some of you wanted to share the story, so I said, well, okay, we'll set up some times to be able to do that. And so I guess I'll put, I'll just say, are you guys willing to talk to other groups that want to talk about some of this stuff, about what your experiences were, and see some of the pictures and to do all that, some of that kind of stuff? Because again, sometimes it's just, I take people down there, I never know what's going to happen. I never know what you're going to experience. I was floored when you guys said, well, they've said it's safe for us to go with the Catholic Charities delegation across the border. We're going to go. And I'm like, okay, that was the day I was leaving. So I'm like, all right, well, take plenty of pictures because I want to see what you're doing, And yet you guys were just like, and again, when I talked to everybody what their experience was, like, oh my gosh, you would not believe what we saw. And then it was showing me the pictures, and I'm like, whoa. So I guess if anybody wants to do that, they can call St. Peter's, and we'll put them in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Put them in touch with you
to
do some of that, at least in terms of some of the story. What message are you bringing back that you want everybody to know? That some of the policies need to change, that we don't need to, what are you going to recommend?
That's an effect, I think. I think that Mary said it so well. We need to start allowing space in our lives to accept this reality. We can no longer put it at an arm's length and say, it doesn't affect me. I don't have a dog in the fight.
Yeah, like there are things that we can do, like a few things. So like the first thing is not withdrawing from it because it's too hard to deal with. This is a reality. This has actually happened to our neighbors right at our border. And so just having that sense of awareness, acknowledging it, accepting it is the first step. Mm-hmm. And then once that happens, when the opportunity arises, you can actually make action. And so the second thing that we would urge people to do, because there is so much suffering going on at the border right now, is to donate to charities like Catholic Charities. They are asking for HEB gift cards, which HEB is like a supermarket. They said it's like the best way to give out things.
It's the best way to
for
get
people.
some of those funds to South Texas.
Exactly.
And again, what they do is they want to go into the grocery store and buy in milk and bread for sandwiches
things for kids.
and do that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, if you feel called to and you have the time and the energy and the resources to do your own mission trip and figure out what's going on for yourself and bring your own group down there. We're just like a couple,
Well,
like a
and
pair.
people, you can share the experience of
Right.
who to contact and where to go
Right.
to do some of those things. Yeah.
People want to come to our country because it's a great country, and one of the reasons that it's great is because we as citizens are powerful and we have a voice, and when there's an injustice like this, we need to make it known.
And again, it's interesting. I didn't have to do nearly the education I had to do this time because I knew the adults were going to ask their own questions. And I was just like, I'm going to try to stay out of the process a little bit and just keep and watch what's going to happen. I will guarantee you that what I've always known to be true is true, and that is that when people experience other human beings, things begin to change.
Yes.
We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute for a wrap-up, so don't go away.
Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in the U.S., and now we have an effective tool to screen for it. A low-dose CT uses a lower amount of radiation than a standard chest CT.
Breathe in.
Better detailed pictures than a chest x-ray of small abnormal areas of the lung. A person must be between 55 to 77 years old, asymptomatic, which means they don't have any symptoms such as coughing up blood, chronic cough, shortness of breath, unusual weight loss, or any other worrisome symptoms. They must also be a current smoker or have quit within the past 15 years, also must have a 30-pack year history or more, which equates to smoking 1 pack a day for 30 years, or 2 packs a day for 15 years. People generally avoid these scans possibly due to fear of what could be found. Like many other cancers, if we can detect lung cancer early, it could be very treatable and life-saving.
Well, again, thank you for joining us for another Sunday morning of faith in our hometown. Sometimes I feel like I do nothing but disturb your Sunday morning with thoughts about how are we going to change the world, or what are we going to do, or is this right, or I just want to bring the issues to the forefront so that we as people of faith might be able to discuss them and figure out what can we do. I'm going to tell you, just in this web of the way that we're all connected, Sister Norma, who runs the Catholic Charities operation down in Brownsville, Sister Norma sent 2 of her staff members here, and they lived here for a month after the tornado. She sent her 2 staff members up here so that they could help people do recovery work after the tornado. And they helped with all that casework and that case management and getting all those things going. Because she cares. When she sees people suffering, she just feels she has to respond and doesn't have an option. God loves Sister Norma. God loves her staff. We got connected with those folks, and this group from St. Peter's got connected with these folks when they were down there. And we're just trying to reach out and try to make a difference. If you want, contact us at St. Peter's. We'll put you in touch. You can maybe go see part of the world and change your own mind. God bless. Join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.